let's start with the watches here and explain to me exactly what this business is.
So watches in general, there's a couple of sides to what I do with watches, but the basic idea is that I've never met a poor jeweler. When I was growing up, I always met these jewelers and they all had a lot of money. So I started wondering, like, what are they doing and how do they make their money? And I started realizing that the watch market was this giant, like, watch conspiracy where there were huge margins, like almost 80, 90% sometimes. And nobody seemed to talk about it. So it was like this quiet thing. You're either in the know or you're not in the know. And so I started kind of understanding that whenever you have such high margins in a business where there's so much money leveraged, then there has to be an opportunity for other people to jump into the market. And that's when I started not looking at watches as a just buy and sell opportunity, but rather understand it from an investment opportunity, short-term, long-term, hype markets, and everything else similar to a regular investment in stocks or anything, except really based on an asset that wouldn't appreciate past something I call a bottom cash value. This is where the difference is between, let's say, an investment in a speculative like penny stock versus a watch, where the penny stock could vary significantly, and constantly, like, potentially even drop to zero or disappear, right? Yeah. Like, and disappear. Versus the watch always has an asset, just like real estate. So it's no different than, trading homes, except that there is such little information out there on watches compared to real estate, because so few people are doing it, that there was just a better opportunity from a exit standpoint of getting higher margins. So if you're in the know, you know how to buy, and most of the people buying are not in the know, so you always have high sells. So you don't have data points similar to real estate or anything else, which makes it a very home run-like investment market.
Give me an example of a typical buy and a sell, what you would consider to be average in the market.
So, like, to give you an example, let's say you walk into a Hublot boutique, and you get excited and you see a watch listed for $15,000.
Right.
That dealer has a 40% margin on the front end. So they'll say, like, I won't even give you a discount, or, it's super rare, super hard. But reality is 40% is what their cost is on buying on the front end. Then they get even more incentives on the back end. So you can pretty much assume that 50% of the money right there on a brand new watch is completely just margin. In addition to that, even Rolex, the most popular Rolex models that are, like, impossible to get anywhere, et cetera, have 38% margins. And yet dealers aren't even giving, like, 5% discounts. They're saying, oh, it's short supply, we're not going to. So, like, once you learn how to actually buy with those discounts and with those margins, as you understand how gray market works and how there's middle buyers, between the Swiss manufacturers and then the actual boutiques, and how just everyone is actually, like, indirectly, like, screwing everyone in the market, which is really this bizarre, like, infrastructure, but it's just a big business.
Is this mostly about new watches or used watches?
Both. Yeah, both. So it's not, like, really a question of new or used. It's more about the asset itself.
So give me an example. Let's say, like, Rolex, okay? Or is that what's the most popular model to be traded in as an investment?
I mean, they're as an investment, more like long-term investments.
Sure.
Are Audemars Piguet, Patek, and Richard Mille.
Let's go to, like, Richard Mille's an interesting one. Let's go to Richard Mille, right?
I'm wearing one now.
Yeah. So how long has that company been in business for?
A while, actually. Like, I want to say it's really become popular in the last, like, 20 years.
Right, because it was not popular.
Well, it's become popular because of their ties to F1 racing and athletes, which the innovation between each watch was, like, very specific to the theme of the watch. So I'll explain what I mean, like, really quickly for people who are not watch people. So a lot of, like, F1, for example, like racing, has a lot of, like, impact, or like tennis players, they have impact on their wrist.
Was it?
Yeah, like, meaning when they hit a racket, there's a lot of impact on their wrist. So a lot of watches would break, the movements would get, destroyed, etc. And so the way the Richard Mille's kind of came into the market was really by the idea of, like, having these demonstrations with, like, tennis players really wearing their watches while playing, and no damage to them. So they would make a watch just for the kind of that art, and it would make it so limited and exclusive, which we've seen this in the investment game.
$400,000 for a
right, and like 10 of them made, etc. And as a result of that, the engineering, kind of met the innovation, and then that really became the forefront of the watchmaking. I mean, every watch, even this one, you'll see there's, like, a curved glass, or there's elements of this that make it unique to just what the theme of this particular watch is. And
so what's the price range of Richard Mille watches that you would typically see traded around, not in reality?
Right. So most of the watches are somewhere between 100 to 250. Like, that's the core of the watches. There is always, of course, the $1 million ones too, but those aren't, like, typical investments. So the majority of those now are going for above market. So meaning you're buying them new for, like, 120, you can't even get them. So the used market's going 170, 160, 140. It's just some of it is hype, some of it is just rarity, and the fact that you just can't get them. And then the other side of it is that as someone who's doing the investment, though, I'm not paying retail, right? So I have my own resources to be able to buy below retail up to 20%. So as a result of that, I'm able to not only play that margin, but also the high margin above that. And as long as you understand kind of where the values are going based on the rarity and the scarcity of the models, you can advise a pretty stable first investment strategy. But in addition to that, you can also add a buy-sell strategy. If someone wanted to wear the watch, let's say you were a customer of the watch and you wanted to do so without losing money on the watch, you would say like, hey, I really want a richer mill, but 100,000 is a lot of money to put in a watch. It doesn't matter if you have a lot of money or not. A lot of people that don't know the market go, well, I don't know if I want to spend 100. What if I lose it? What if something happens? So if you wanted that strategy to, I want to get out of it, making sure I don't lose money, then you could technically wear a watch for free and make a couple of bucks when you get out. So either ways, as a user or as a collector, there's still leverage.
So tell me tell me the system. Let's get specific here. How does someone go out and buy watches cheaply? How does that process start?
Well, it's not about just cheaply, right? It's about knowing which models to buy.
Okay, when I say cheap, I mean at below a price where they can like turn around and make a profit as a trade. And what's the average hold time on that?
Okay, so if we're looking at Richer specifically or all watches? Okay, if we're talking about watch trading in general, watch trading in general, it's just basically understanding the supply and demand of each brand and really the scarcity of how many people are looking for that brand in a given time.
All right, but you forced me to get specific, so I'm going to force you to get specific.
That's fine.
You're giving me very general stuff.
No.
I want to hear real stuff.
Right. So let's just use it. Let's use it for the way basically someone that doesn't know anything about watches can kind of know which watches to go after.
Sure.
Fair enough. So the way I would do it is I'd look on a basic tool, as one of the tools we use is eBay as an example. So eBay is a huge marketplace for watch trading. A lot of people don't know that.
Okay.
So you can literally go on eBay and type in a general term like Panerai, Richard Mille, Patek, or Rolex, and you'll immediately see hundreds, if not thousands, of listings of those watches. You can also then scrutinize them based on the most popular listings, the ones that are getting the most hits, the most views. So right there, within just one of the thousands of platforms you can use, you just have this amazing bird's eye view of like who's buying what and what's being clicked on and what's being watched.
They're real or fraudulent or fake.
So in our business, we talk about buying the seller, because in our business, the day you sell a fake watch is the last day you're in business. Meaning so you're always accountable for your inventory. And so usually if you have reputable sellers, which you can see on eBay, since we're using that example, is you have the feedback system, of course, and you can see previous sales they've done. You can also Google the people selling the watches. So you can understand the baseline of first, who is selling the watch, and then two, which watches are most popular. Mm-hmm. So that's the first step in kind of getting acquainted with different brands and different models of each brand, because there's so many models and so many different brands that people get confused about where to get started, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the core of the beginning of searching.
On eBay.
Well, this is just one of the places you can start, since you wanted very specific, strategies. So you can do that.
Is that the best one?
I like eBay as a whole, because one of the best ways to buy watches cheap is to buy directly from end users and not dealers, because obviously we understand that anytime you're buying fish from a fisherman, then obviously the fisherman is to eat, right? So he doesn't like fish either.
Right. So you couldn't help yourself. I know. Hey, I got some fish.
Exactly. So basically the point is you want to buy watches from end users who lack the ability to sell them, because they don't know and they don't want to go to a dealer.
Makes perfect
so
sense.
There's that
So these like average people who bought watches, maybe have a liquidity crisis and want to sell
exactly and need money. And so
then how do you know that they're not? So those people are going to be one-time sellers. So how would you know that they're selling something real?
So there are a couple of ways to do that. First off, there's paperwork that goes with the watches. And once you get good at the watch, not always needing paperwork, but once you get good at the watch game, you understand how to read, first off, what is a real watch. Most of these, like for example, this watch has a skeleton inside. So it's easy to see the movement inside and to see the jewels, etc. Not all watches do.
Sure.
But you have to have some basic knowledge of what the watches look like. And you can use, if you don't know anything, like we teach in our training, you can go and literally use Google images, from the core websites to identify watches and actually look at them face to face, right?
Okay.
In addition to that, also the seller does matter, even if he's not a watch seller, because people that are selling $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 watches on eBay also have sold usually previous things on eBay. So I would not recommend someone goes and buys something from a one-time seller who's never sold anything, who's located in China, and then try to buy a watch from that guy just because the deal's good, right?
Sure.
So as much as you have to buy from the right seller, you have to be willing to pay a little bit more to get it from a person that's worth, actually transacting with, right? Because the headache's not worth it otherwise.
100%.
You know how many people come to me and they go, mentor me? And I'm like, great. Why? Oh, because you're successful. I'm like, sure. Why? What makes me successful? Oh, you have all this shit. I'm like, really? Like, how do you know I wasn't born into it? You know, how do you know, like, my parents didn't give me a Ferrari at 10? You know, it doesn't matter.